Hello, welcome to Free Will, Science, and Religion. I'm Chandler Klebs. I'm here with George Ortega, Mitch J, Michael Walsh, David Joseph, and Trick Slattery. And today our topic is going to be about theories of time and their implications for determinism. So I'm going to turn it over to Michael Walsh because it's kind of his topic and he's going to present some different models of time or something like that, I guess. So take it away, Michael.
Thanks, Chandler. Okay, I've been wanting to talk about this for some time, and one of the reasons why is because I've been kind of obsessed with the idea of time for the past couple years, and I think that the view of time you have has huge implications on just about everything you think about. Your entire worldview can be modified depending on what version of time you consider. So I'm just going to go into some of the science and some of the philosophy behind different views of time, and then what we're going to do later is we're just going to talk about the implications for that with determinism and free will. So there are three main theories of time, and the philosophical names of them are presentism, possibilism, and eternalism. And presentism is the view that only the present moment exists everywhere in the universe. There's a universal absolute now. Now is the same now for everyone. Possibilism is the view that only the present moment exists and everything that happened in the past. So the present and the past exist, but not the future. And eternalism is the view that every single moment exists. There is no privileged now for anyone. Every single moment from the first second of the Big Bang to 10 to the 100 years from now, maximum entropy in the future, that already exists. And that our subjective view of what is now is just like our subjective feeling of what is here when we're in space. There is no objective here. It's just our subjective opinion. So to summarize them again, presentism entails that the future and past do not exist. Possibilism entails that the present and the past still exist, and therefore it's commonly referred to as the growing block theory. And eternalism entails that all moments in time exist, such that the universe can be thought of as an eternal block. That's why it's commonly referred to as the block universe. So that those are the three main positions on time that exist in philosophy. So now I want to briefly go into the science of things and what does science have to say about the nature of time? Well, originally, Newton had in his physical theories, he had this absolute now, this absolute reference frame, and the speed of light was not constant, and it can go faster. If you were traveling in a fast spaceship and shine a flashlight, the speed of light would go faster than someone staying still, shining a flashlight. And in order for that to be possible, you kind of have to have this objective now reference frame. But about 200 or so years later, Einstein comes along and he discovers that the speed of light is the same in every single reference frame. And the only way that could be possible is if we were to give up this notion of an absolute now. Because if the speed of light is the same in all reference frames, it takes us to this notion of the relativity of simultaneity. And the relativity of simultaneity means that what you consider two events that are separated by a distance that you consider happening simultaneously will be relative to your reference frame. So if you and I are standing uh, still relative to one another, we would both consider two events separated by distance to be happening at the same time. We would consider them both to be simultaneous. But if you were, let's say, moving towards me or away from me or perpendicular to me, uh, and you and I both saw two events that were happening, what I would consider at the same time, you would consider one of them happening before the other or one after the other. So we would never be able to agree upon any two events separated by distance as happening at the same time. It's all relative to your reference frame. And the implication of this on time is that if simultaneity is relative to reference frame, then we cannot have an objective now that we can say is true for all reference frames, and we can't say that there is an objective time in an objective reference frame for the entire universe. Everything is relative. And so that would mean that special relativity would kind of push towards eternalism, and it would essentially falsify presentism and possibilism because they both require an objective now time slice. So if science is pushing towards eternalism, what this means is that the entire history of the universe exists in the same exact way that the entire history of a movie exists. If you were to unwind a reel of film of a movie, every single moment exists, and whatever slice of that movie any character is in, that's not really any objective. It's not any more objectively real than any other part of the movie. Every single thing exists. So this view, of course, is perfectly compatible with determinism. In fact, determinism would be the best view that would be compatible with eternalism, because what it would mean is that the future is inevitable. There's no way you can get around it. It's just like in a movie. No matter how many times you rewind it and play it again, you're going to get the exact same ending of the movie. There's no way you can deviate from it. And this would also mean that all of our future actions are essentially frozen into place, no matter how much we like that or not like that. And so the implications on free will for this would be it would essentially be the worldview that would be the most compatible with the idea of determinism and the idea that uh, we have no control over anything that happens in the future. So I just wanted to lay that out and then go into just to have a discussion about the implications of this for determinism and the implications of this for free will. So, what do you guys think about these three different views on time?
Okay, Mike,
Um,
I want to challenge your the contention that there is no quote unquote absolute time
Sure,
because, huh? All right, so
sure. No,
yeah,
go ahead, go ahead.
right. So like basically our understanding is that the universe is 13.72 billion years old. And my understanding is that like it doesn't matter where one is within our universe, that fact would remain. So that seems to be kind of like an absolute statement of the age of the universe, which is an absolute statement of time.
Not exactly, because when cosmologists determine the age of the universe, they're using a notion known as cosmic time, but cosmic time isn't exactly uh, objective time. What they're doing is they're kind of averaging out different notions of time and then using that as a way of giving a more or less approximation towards the origin of the universe. And in different reference frames, when you measure when time, you would eventually come to roughly the same age. But that in different reference frames, time would just be moving slower or faster. But
Wait a
it's
minute.
still the same time passing by,
No, no,
one
but
moment at a time.
Mike, just to understand you clearly, are you saying, for example, like at the either edge of the universe, that the age of the universe would be different than it is for us here on Earth?
Wait, say that again?
All right, we have like, the universe is however wide it is in diameter. So are you saying that at either edge, for example, of our known universe, the age of the universe would be different than it is from our perspective here on Earth?
No, no, it would not.
Well, that's
Let
my
me
point.
let me read you a quote that goes into this. This is from a scientist who basically throws down this notion, and he's actually, interestingly, a Christian, believe it or not. And okay, so here's what he says. Oh my God. Seems
Well,
like I
Mike,
have.
it's all right. We're in
Hold on,
agreement on this. We're in agreement.
hold
So
on.
you're
Hold on.
saying,
Let me just read it. Let me just read it. Now it is. Here's a quote from this guy. Now it is true that on some specially. Hold on. Uh, hold on. My computer is just going crazy right now. I gotta like. Oh my god.
try
Sorry guys.
rebooting. Just reboot it.
I have a virus on my computer. All right, so I can't unfortunately read you that quote, but it basically shows that that's a false notion. It's not. It's not. It doesn't mean that the notion of time would be different depending on where you are in the universe. It's just cosmologists use a kind of it's a mathematical formula that kind of averages out, that gets us the best approximation of how old the
All
universe
right. So
is.
so we're saying like regardless of our ability to actually know it, there is an absolute age of the universe in every reference frame. So that kind of like would mean that there's an absolute time.
It doesn't mean that there's an absolute now reference frame. Think about
Allow
this.
me to, yes, if you don't
Think
mind,
about.
Mike. Go
Okay,
ahead,
go ahead.
please finish your thought. I
I'll,
was
okay, allow this. George, imagine a block universe, right? There's a beginning point that let's say it's a low entropy state. So let's say it's a singularity, and let's say time goes in the right direction. So the arrow of time goes towards the right. So as the universe goes on, it gets wider and wider from the Big Bang, right? And so it looks like a cone going out in towards the right direction, like a cone on its side. Okay, just imagine that. That's the block universe. We're at some dot in there, and from our dot, it's 13.7 or 8
exactly.
billion light years from this low entropy state, this Big Bang. It doesn't mean that there's an absolute now reference frame because the whole entire thing exists.
All right, but let me ask you the question again. So I asked you the question relative to three reference frames. One is let's say the left diameter side of the universe relative to us. The other is the right, and the third reference frame is us here on Earth. I asked you if the age of the universe would be the same for each reference frame, and you said yes.
Yeah, but from their perspective, if you're in that reference frame, time flows exactly as you would think it does regularly. It's just that from our perspective, looking at their reference frame, we would see that their time would be moving different. So everything
Allow
is
me,
relative to
allow
everything
me to
else.
make just to introduce an example here. One of my roles, I think, in this podcast is to sort of rein things in when they get a little bit, uh, when we get a little bit entrenched here, because
Mitch,
after all, this
we're
is for.
just disagreeing. Chill.
Yeah, yeah, I know. I'm just saying because there are the listeners to consider, though. There's always, I mean, I don't know how many people are listening, but that's always to consider. So, I mean, to simplify this example that I think that Mike is trying to present, I would say let's think of a map. Think of a map of the United States, and say the beginning of time is Texas, and let's say this current place we are in time is, I don't know, Georgia. So, relative to Texas, we can talk about the distance from Georgia to Texas. And if we move forward in time, we could say we're further north on the map. So it would be greater time compared to that original point in time, Texas. And the past would be Mexico, which is south of Texas. But the map is just there. The map is laid out. The map is already there. So this is sort of like Mike's point here about how it's all relative. If you think about time as space, as we often do, there's this theory of space-time, I think it becomes much easier to illustrate this point.
No, Mitch, I think we're exploring a different point. And using your map analogy, for example, let's say we've determined the distance of the United States from east to west coast is 3,300 miles, right? Now, whether you're in Idaho, New York, Missouri, Canada, anywhere, that distance from each end of the United States would still be the same.
No, no, no.
So
But my point is, here's my point though. Imagine that time is like space. So to say, let's compare like California to New York or something, okay? Because if you want an east to west kind of thing. Now, if the current point in time is New York and California is the beginning of time, then you can say, oh, time is 13 point whatever billion years old. It's this distance from California to New York. Now, what the future would be represented by is a place east of New York. So something that is east of New York, that would represent a future point in time. So this is consistent with the
I
modern
understand. I'm not
science,
contesting relativity or its implications on time. I'm
right?
contesting the absence of an objective that is actually a point different from relativity.
Yeah,
No, but
it
this.
is.
It, it wouldn't
Go
really
ahead.
be any difference, George, because if someone else was, let's say, um, 10 billion years ago, they would, if they had the right tools, of course, they would measure the universe as being only 3.7 billion years
Exactly,
old.
exactly.
Yeah,
Well, because
it makes
was.
no difference.
Wait a
Yeah,
minute. Like
from
the
their
further back
subjective
you go in
perspective,
time,
it would be.
well, no,
From their
I mean,
subjective perspective, it would be.
but that makes sense objectively. In other words, if we go back 4 billion years in time, we have to conclude that the universe is only like 9 billion years old. So like
Right, but
there's
George,
no
that does not at all mean that there is an objective now for the entire universe. Not at all. It's just like if we were on a football field and you were at the 20-yard line and I was at the 50-yard line and we're trying to measure the distance between where we are to the goalpost. You would measure 20 yards, I would measure 50 yards. It doesn't mean that only my time exists. It would mean the whole football field still exists.
All right, I agree with you in terms of time being relative to position, but for example, relativity is a concept that relates one object to the next. You have to, it has to like compare one object in space time to another. However, if we take the totality of the universe, it's not a relative concept. It's a concept of singularity. So therefore, that even though it may appear to one point in the universe, the time is different than to the second, objectively considering the totality, the singularity of the universe, there may in fact be an objective time that relates to all, regardless of their position.
Well, the singularity would not be, it would be the same for everyone because the only time you have the relativity of time is when you have different space. If the entire universe is crunched down into one single point, an infinitely small point or a really small point, then you can have relativity of time. Yeah,
Right, but
every single time there's one single time.
what
But
I'm
once
saying
the
though is,
universe expands and you get space, then you have relativity of time.
okay, let's say we're looking at the Washington Monument, right? The Washington Monument is what, 330, who knows, feet tall. Okay,
555 feet tall.
thank you. All right, so all right now, if we're looking at it from Missouri, that's going to be like really teeny. Okay, if we're looking at it like from a foot away, it's going to be huge. Now these are relative perspectives, right? That give us
Of course.
different impressions of this monument, but we know objectively that it is 550 feet tall, and this
No,
principle
All right.
applies to the universe.
no, it is
Can I
not.
jump in? I'd like to jump in on this one a little bit because I think what we got to understand is when it comes to relativity, let's just talk about special relativity, for example. Special relativity means that the faster you move, the slower time goes. So if you're traveling close to the speed of light, time slows down for you basically. Um, so if you have somebody traveling close to the speed of light, and then relative to the person that isn't traveling closer to the speed of light, time is actually going slower for the person that is traveling at the speed of light. Even if you're looking down at these two, you're looking at the one traveling close to the speed of light and the one not traveling at the speed of light. Time is actually slower for the one traveling according to special relativity. So we could kind of block those together. See. I From my perspective, and I know I'm kind of a time agnostic, meaning I'm agnostic on whether it's a block universe or a growing block universe or presentist, but I lean towards George's presentism in the context of relativity happening within basically a framework. So if you could kind of think of it as frames of a movie, except within each frame you have durations, like these stretched out areas or these areas that are condensed in. So you can kind of think of each moment as a frame, but within the frame itself, there's different durations that happen. So one person could age um, slower than another person, than its twin who is moving slower than the other person. So that's the relativity that I see. I have a problem with certain types of relativity, which denote that both that is what I call point of view relativity. So basically, point of view relativity says that the person that's moving fast to the other person, that person basically the motion is the same. So I kind of have take issue with that. So basically, motion is like for the person moving fast, the other person is moving equally as fast in the opposite direction according to relativity. But I take issue with that based on certain scientific experiments that took place with planes, basically, that showed that clocks have slowed down due to those planes, and then when brought back to the normal state, they're still slower. So
Well, the way to get around that is the clocks are on the planes are moving angularly. They're not going in a straight line out. So like in the twin paradox, if you have someone on Earth and you have someone in a rocket ship that goes out near the speed of light to, let's say a distant planet and then comes back around to the Earth, the twin on the rocket ship will have aged less than the twin on Earth, right?
yeah, but
And
these plane
the reason why
experiments
it's
didn't do that. These plane experiments went from one location A to location B with no turning around, basically going from one location to the other, and they were determined while on the plane itself. so
I'm not sure. I know that there was one that flew around the Earth. That was done back in the 70s with an atomic clock, and it was consistent with Einstein's predictions. But it is moving relative and angularly, and so when the twin paradox is solved by when the spaceship comes back around, that's when the momentum changes, and that's when the other twin on Earth is allowed to age when you do the calculations correctly. And so that's why it's not like a true paradox. It's just an apparent paradox. But I mean, the main notion though is how would you explain then the relativity of simultaneity if there is an objective reference frame, an objective now in the universe?
well, that's what I contest. Actually, I contest that I see that as what I call point of view time relativity. So basically, from the perspective of the person on the platform and looking at the person going by them in the train, they see the relativity different than the person that's on the train looking back at the person on the platform. So that's just a point of view reference frame. The relativity is just a point of view
Okay, so
reference.
you're trying to say that it's just like the time it takes for the light to travel to your eyes. It just seems like it's
Right.
traveling.
What I'm saying is in reality, it's the person that's on the train that has the motion, that has the velocity, the actual velocity, that is actually the one that time is slowing down for. It isn't that time is from the perspective of the person on the train looking back at the person on the platform, time is slowing down for that person on the platform. The clock is going slower for them. That's just
Right.
their perspective. But in reality, time slows down because of the speed that you're moving at, and the speed contracts that time basically because it's basically, if you look at it as like a beam going up and down on the train, in a straight line, when that train is moving to the right, that beam is, like you said, on an angle. It goes on the angle, and
Right.
that stretches the length of that beam. And then since that beam can't go faster than the speed of light, time has to slow down to compensate for that. But it isn't compensating for the person on the platform that doesn't have the motion, is what I'm saying. Even though, from the perspective of the person on the train, the point of view relativity, it is.
Right. Imagine the experiment where you have two light clocks, right? One guy's on a platform and one guy's on a train. And the train is going sideways to the person on the platform. And let's just say it's going near the speed of light. For the person on the
Correct.
platform, he looks at the train and he thinks everything on the train is going in slow motion. All the events
Correct.
happening there are slow. From the perspective
Exactly.
of the train, he sees the person on the platform and everything
Correct.
there is going in slow motion. But if
Exactly. Yes.
the two light clocks cannot be in sync with one another, one of them have to be off somehow
Right.
to determine, and
Yes.
it's determined by the all the relative reference frames of these two objects in space-time. And
Correct.
but if the clocks are off, you can't say that there's a simultaneity, because if there was
Oh
simultaneity,
no,
then the
no.
two
Yeah.
clocks would
Right.
be in
Right.
sync.
Right. I agree with you, and I'm saying that the clock on the train is actually slowing down. I'm saying that as you go faster, so I agree with relativity in the regards that as you move faster, time slows down. So the person on the train, they're aging slower than the person on the platform, regardless of the fact that they're looking back at the person on the platform and seeing them aging slower. Does
Right,
that make
right.
sense?
Yeah, it's very weird. But if you have, let's say, let's say the train car, right? Let's say there's a light in the center of the train car, and there's two people at each end of the train car, and the light goes off, right? It travels at the speed of light towards each end of the train car at the same speed, because light is equal in all reference frames. And let's
Right.
say when it gets to the end of the train car, each person, when they see the light, they're going to shoot themselves in the head, let's say, right?
Hmm.
From the perspective of the train car, those two people shoot themselves in the head at the exact same time. From the perspective of the platform, the person going in the forward direction shoots himself in the head first, and the person going in uh, the person the person in the end of the train car in the direction that it's going towards shoots himself in the head first, and the person on the other end of the train car that the train is going towards shoots himself in the head later.
Do we have to
Now,
shoot
how
people in
can
the
you
head?
possibly make sense of this situation
Wait,
with
wait.
an objective
I
reference
want you
frame?
to say that once again with where's the light positioned?
Okay,
This
okay.
time he
So
puts his hat on.
imagine the train car, right? Imagine the train car, right? It's go.
Yes.
Let's just in your frame of reference, you're on the platform. Let's say it's traveling towards the right. Okay,
Yes.
the person standing on the left side of the train car, and the person
Yes.
from your perspective, and the person
Yeah.
standing on
Yeah.
the
I
right
got all
side.
that, and the
Yeah.
other person standing on the
The
right of
person
the
on the
train car.
left side of the train car shoots himself in the head first,
Where's the
because
light? Where's the light?
light is the light is in the exact center of the train car, and these two guys are at each end of the train car. Okay, so the
So
light comes
the
out of the
light doesn't move. The light doesn't move. It's just there in the center.
no, yeah, the light doesn't. The light is just the light that goes on. When I say the light moves, I mean the actual light coming out of the light bulb. That's what I mean.
But why are the people shooting themselves in the head?
Because they're so depressed over special relativity that they're shooting themselves in the head.
Whoa, I can understand that after listening to you guys.
Each of them has gone insane by trying to figure out relativity. That's why. So
Yeah.
from
So
your
so so
perspective on the
you're saying in actuality, from the perspective of the person on the platform, the person on the left shoots himself first, and you're saying that that is actually a true statement. I'm saying no.
that
It's
is a
it's a
true
false statement.
that is a true statement,
It's a
because
true statement from a
no
point
one
of
can
from the
say that.
point of view.
Right, but exactly
Pers-
the whole point though is that there is no true statement that is objective. Every single true statement is from a subjective reference frame.
Well, I think that's where we're disagreeing.
Yeah, that's what we're disagreeing with. I mean,
Okay, so if you think that there is an objectively true statement about this situation, which reference frame is the true one?
The reference frame is the Big Bang. For example, like from the Big Bang,
George,
yeah,
the Big Bang is
stop.
irrelevant in this situation.
It is not, because we
It
measure
is
time.
totally
It
irrelevant in
is
this
not.
situation.
It is not, and I'll explain to you why. Because like if you're gonna like put a time to when something happened, that time could be calculated back to the most general calculation of that time refers to the Big Bang.
Okay, but you have to understand, George, that from everybody's subjective perspective, time is flowing normally. It
I
only
realize
appears
that,
that it's
but it's
flowing faster or
subjective.
slower
But
from another perspective.
that's why we're saying that, like, in addition to the
yeah.
subjective, there's a more generalized objective.
If you were going to look at perspective, for example, you know that train tracks don't merge at the horizon, and trains don't get smaller as they hit that horizon. Yet, from everybody's in the world perspective, if they're far away from the horizon, it looks like the train gets smaller and it vanishes at the horizon. But we know in reality that isn't the case. I'm saying that it's a point of view time relativity from the person on the platform. I'm saying that time relativity is true in the fact that the people on the train are actually aging slower because of they're in the bubble, the relativistic bubble that is moving slower, and time has to compensate for that. But that's it. So that's
Okay,
why I'm
but
a presentist.
that wouldn't solve the ladder paradox. You know the ladder paradox?
Explain it again.
Okay, so in addition to time dilation, time moving faster and slower, there's length
Yes.
contraction.
Right.
From your perspective, relatively, if you see someone traveling perpendicularly really fast, they will be really thin, right? Their lengths contract in the direction that they're moving in. So imagine you
Right.
have a garage, and the garage is 20 feet long, and there's a front door and a back door to the garage. And you have a ladder that is, let's say it's let's say it's 19 feet long, right? So
Right.
the ladder is going through the garage. Let's say that both doors are open, and it's traveling at, let's say, the near the speed of light. As from
Right.
your perspective, the garage is still to you, but the ladder is contracted, so the entire ladder can fit inside the garage. Now imagine
Right.
the doors of the garage closing while the ladder is inside. The
Right.
entire for a split moment, the entire ladder is inside the garage and both doors are closed. And then they open up and
Correct.
the ladder continues going out.
Right.
From the perspective of the ladder, the garage is length contracted. And so it has to
Right.
go through the garage, but the garage is squeezed tight and it cannot fit into the entire garage and have both doors closed at the same time. One door has to open, the ladder has to go through, and then
But
the
but
next
but
door has to open and
it's the
close.
ladder that's moving the speed of light, or close to the speed of
The
light,
ladder
correct?
the ladder is moving close to the speed of light, yes. And
But the
so
garage door is not, correct?
the garage door is not. Well, from your perspective, the
Right.
garage door is still to you, and that's really all that
Right.
matters in this case. So the garage
And
is just 10 feet in front of you.
and
So the
that's what
ladder
I would
comes.
that's what
How,
I would have contention over the fact that both the ladder and the garage door are moving at close to the speed of light because the ladder is moving at the speed of light. So that's the relativity that I say is a rather a point of view relativity rather than an ontic real relativity.
but in this scenario, we have the difference of, from your perspective, standing still relative to the garage, you see the entire
The
garage
contraction.
door closed and the
Yes.
ladder in it.
Yeah,
But
it's the same
from
thing.
the
It's the same
perspective
thing.
of the
It's the
ladder,
same thing for the time. It's the same thing for time dilation. So from the point of view of the person in the train, they see the other person dilating slower, and from the point of view from the person on the platform, they see the person in the train dilating slower, and likewise contraction from the point of view of the ladder, the garage is contracting, and from the point of view of the garage, the ladder is contracting. And I'm saying that's point of view relativity. I'm saying that the actual thing that is contracting is the ladder. The actual thing that's time dialing and the actual thing that is contracting is the ladder, because that's the thing that is actually has the velocity. Now you could say that from the point of view of the ladder, the garage has the same velocity, but the problem is when you get into the real experiments in these type of things, that doesn't equate, because what would happen is the clocks would always end up as the same at the end of the experiment.
no, it wouldn't.
It would.
One could be slower than the other, and one could be faster than the other.
How? If relative to the one, the other one is moving at the same velocity, or moving at that fast
Oh, okay,
velocity,
yeah, yeah.
and relative
If
to the
there's
other,
no,
the
if
other one's.
there's right, right,
So
right.
I'm
If
saying in
I
reality,
get that
only
point, but
one is moving at the faster velocity in reality. So
if it turns though, if it has an angular turn relative to the other thing, then it changes. But if it's just two objects next to each other and one goes away really fast at the speed of or near the speed of light, they will be
right.
from each perspective, the other one is slowing down, and so that adds up to the same thing, I
All right,
guess.
so let's say a ship takes off close to the speed of light, right? From you, you're just floating in space. Ship takes off from your perspective at the speed of light, and then it slows down to a stop. At that point, is there one clock going slower than the other, or are they both the same?
I think they might be off, and the reason why is because the spaceship had to gain speed when it was starting off. It wasn't traveling at an equal speed, and so as it's gaining speed, its clock does slow down relative to yours, such that it could
But
take the two clocks out of sync.
if the point of view relativity is ontic relativity, then so do you. So as that ship is taking off, you're taking off away from that ship relative to the ship. So it should be identical from the start of the slow start to the speeding up to the slowing down to the end. It should be identical, and at the end, those clocks should be in sync. If they're not, then there's a problem with that. So, and I'm saying there's not. I'm saying the Haefel-Keating experiments show that there's not, and there's experiments with particles as well that show that it's not accelerated particles. So I'm saying that kind of relativity I kind of have some philosophical contention with.
Okay,
Does that make
let's go
sense?
back to let's go back to the latter paradox though.
Okay.
If there is an objective reference frame, what frame is that showing? Is it showing a situation where the garage is closed and the ladder's in it, or is it showing a situation where the ladder is way too long to fit inside the garage?
The ladder is too long to fit inside the garage. The ladder contracts. The ladder is
Well,
actually
no. From
contracting.
the perspective of the ladder, the garage contracts, and so the ladder can't
Right.
fit inside the garage because the garage is like being squished down to like maybe a couple feet wide, and so from that perspective, the ladder can't fit inside the garage with both
Right.
doors closed at the same time.
Right. And
And
I'm
so
saying that isn't
if
ontic. That's just a point of view relativity. It's like saying,
it
oh
can't
well,
just be a point of view relativity. It has to be an ontological relativity, because
why?
how are you going to say that which reference frame are you going to choose and say this is the one real one?
I'm saying the one that
I
actually has velocity is the real one. Is the one that's really contracting.
So you're saying the ladder's perspective is the real one?
I'm saying that the ladder's perspective is that the garage is contracting, and so that's the incorrect one.
why is it
But why is it incorrect? The whole point of
Because
relativity is that no reference frame is the correct one.
exactly?
and I'm saying
Why?
this is the mistake. So okay,
Well,
we're
why
talking
is one
philosophically
incorrect?
here because time slows down due to velocity, and if you're saying that both have velocity, which is what you're saying, you're basically saying that the ladder and the garage door have velocity, right? Are you agreeing with me on that?
It only depends on reference frame. If you're on the perspective of the ladder, the garage has velocity. If you're the perspective
Right.
of the guy standing on the floor, then the ladder has velocity.
Right, and I'm saying the experiments show that the ones that actually have the velocity do all of the slowing down for the time, for example. And I think the
What
same
do you mean?
thing
What do you
for
mean the ones that actually have the velocity? By saying that, you're
I'm saying
presupposing that there's an
the
objective
plane
frame.
rather than the platform, the plane rather than the platform.
Uh, I
So
don't get it.
if you
Wait,
sync
guys,
up two,
let me present an example. See if this makes sense to you. So you were talking about like putting a clock on a plane, and as it moves from one part of the country to the next or around the globe, we'll find that the clock goes slower, right? Now, I think we
correct.
can agree on that. So,
Yeah.
Mike, according to your contention that we can't determine, objectively or ontically which is going faster or slower, let's say we have a clock where this plane took off from. I think we can determine that it's not going slower, right? Only the clock on the ship is going slower. So, isn't that a way to determine the objective? Acceleration of one object relative to the other.
I don't get that, George. I mean, are you saying that that it would all still be relative?
Right.
There would not necessarily be an objective anything.
Okay, like if we have a plane, moving fast across the globe or the planet, a country or something, we can after it lands, after it returns, to its original origin, whatever, we can determine that the clock on that plane has moved more slowly than a clock in the position from where it started.
And how are you going to make that measurement within a
Because
relative?
when you get back, you
We
compare
sync the
one clock to the.
clocks.
You just
Yeah,
look
you
at them.
sync
Where?
the
I mean, come
clocks at the
on.
And
beginning.
where would you do that?
At the
In the
point
beginning.
of, yes.
They
And
would
for
both
which-
actually have to be the same height from the Earth, because if one is even just a few feet higher, that could knock them off.
Fine.
Because
No, no, no.
That's
gravity
easy.
is
The
fine.
Halfel-Keating experiments they take into account general relativity as well. They factor out the equation for general relativity, and special relativity still shows that the clock's moving slower due to special relativity, with the general relativity taken out of the equation. So,
Yeah, no,
so
I agree. I agree. I was just making the point.
so the
You
height
have
doesn't
to
matter.
have them-
The gravity doesn't matter because they're taking that out of the equation.
But Mike,
Okay,
what
they're
Trick's
factoring
point
in the
is,
height.
Mike, what Trick's point is that you can objectively determine which object is moving relative to another object.
How? You can't.
We just did that.
You're
We're just
basically
like,
well, the only thing you're doing is you're basically just picking a reference frame and saying this is the
Exactly.
objective one,
Okay,
Exactly.
let's put it.
and it
Let's do
seems to
this.
be pretty arbitrary.
Let's do
Mike.
this. Let's do this
Well, hold on,
simplistically,
Trick.
Mike.
Hold on.
Okay.
Let me. All right, Mike. If we couldn't determine which was moving relative to the other, then these clocks would both show a slowness in their rate. You know, just the
Right.
fact that one shows it and
Equally.
the other one does it shows that there's an objective movement of one as opposed to the other.
Why? Why would that be the case? If you were on the plane, the clock on the ground would be changed. Would have changed, and it would have all calculated
Okay.
appropriately with the equations of special
Okay.
relativity.
Okay. Let's just do this simplistically. Imagine you're there's two bubbles. You're in one. There's two clocks in two bubbles. They're synced clocks. Okay. Now imagine one bubble moving away from the other, circling, making a circle, and coming back to that other bubble. From the perspective of that, the other one basically did the same thing. So they would be in sync. The slowness of the one speeding up until close to the speed of light or whatever, the fastest of the plane or whatever, and then coming down and slowing back, the exact same thing would happen for the other bubble, and time would sync up at the end, and the two clocks would show identically, even though during they don't show identically. At the end, when they both come together and they're both stopped, both clocks should be identical. The fact that they're
Okay.
not, however, says that one was actually moving and the other one wasn't moving.
Are you sure that they wouldn't be identical if they're traveling in straight lines and not angularly changing?
It doesn't the angles doesn't matter because relative to the other, it's making this exact same angles. So if you're in a bubble and it makes 50 angles, it makes zigzags, for example, from the perspective of the one making zigzags, the other one is making zigzags, the exact same zigzags. There's no
Right.
difference because everything is relative. So from the two perspectives, both are making zigzags identically, and then when they come back, they should be synced up at that point. One shouldn't have gotten slower
Um,
per that type of
I
ontic
think
relativity.
that the reason why that is not the case is because of the angular gyration, the angular moving around, and I think the energy it takes for you to speed up and speed down. That does factor
I'm saying,
into the
but
equation.
you're saying that the fact that something speeds up is relative. So the thing that we're saying is on the platform, you're saying is actually speeding up as well, per the other thing, per relativity.
Right. And
So
Mike, you just brought in the explanation of energy. So yes, if we can show that one has a greater expenditure of energy, that's another way of showing that it's in motion and the other not.
Okay, how about this? There's another perspective. A third party, is traveling near the speed of light at the exact opposite direction that the guy traveling out of the Earth is. And so he says all your clocks are both different. So where does his point of view factor in? Who's to say that any one of them is objective? Because it seems to be
Say
that
that
you're
again.
trying to say, okay, so you got someone on Earth, and
Yep.
someone travels on a spaceship. Let's say they go right, and then they turn back around and come left. And
Yes.
there's someone else, a third person, on another spaceship traveling, let's say, up and down, and they're both taking into consideration your clocks and your time dilation and length contraction and everything, and
Right.
they see that both of your clocks are different relative to his on his spaceship. So
Again, you're looking at the point of view relativity. When we bring these clocks back, they'll all be different because each is going a different velocity and each is
Right.
doing different things.
And
But
Mike, in your example, this third person actually represents the quote unquote objective view. He's noticing or she's noticing that there's a difference in the rate of the clocks.
but why would they be the objective point of view?
Well, because
because they're
they're seeing the phenomenon, from outside of it rather than from taking part in it.
Where is outside?
But what if they have the opposite of the time the clocks?
Um,
What if they think the guy on the
well, that's what we're
Earth
saying.
is
We're saying they couldn't.
faster or slower?
We're saying it couldn't because in actuality, objectively, one clock is slowing down relative to the other. There's no way that that person could see them as identical.
But uh, when we say objective, we just mean an objective reference frame relative to two other things. But it doesn't mean universally objective. It's just
Well,
like if I see a fight going on, instead of considering the two people of the fight, I'm the spectator. My perspective is objective, but it's still, in the overall scheme of things, a relative perspective.
Well, that's why I started this with arguing for an objective reality. In other words, in terms of like the 13.72 billion years of the universe, that's an objective fact, regardless of whether you are. So this slowing down of one
Well,
clock
hold on.
as opposed to the
It's
other.
only it's not objective regardless of where you are in space time. It is relative to where we are right now in space time.
Well, I mean, yes, you're assuming like in other words, all right, you're right. So like basically, well, oh, that's an interesting question. So, all right, right now from Earth, the universe, from the Big Bang is 13.72 billion years old. Now, my assertion would be that it doesn't matter where you are in the universe, at least at this present moment, coinciding with where we are on Earth, it has to be the same time. Now, if you're going back to a universe like, let's say, 2 billion years after the Big Bang, then certainly there's going to be a difference because, like, the time hasn't elapsed from then till now.
Right, exactly. It's just like if we were to measure the distance between where we are to the North Pole. If you're a little bit north from me, your distance is going to be less. If I'm a little bit more south, my distance is going to be a little bit more.
Right, but
But
I'm talking about like,
I can't say that my distance is the objective one and your distance is the wrong one, and you
well,
can't
but what
say the opposite either.
Mike, what I'm saying is like we're referring to now. In other words, like if like in this moment of the universe, the universe is 13.72 billion years old. There is no place in the universe where it's 15 billion years old or
well,
20 billion years old.
this is where I
Well,
might disagree with you, George. Oh,
that's
go ahead.
not true, because what if someone 3 billion years in the future measures the age of the universe?
It'll have to have taken place 3 billion years into the future. It can't
Right.
be taking place
George,
now.
let me interject for a second. But George, this is the mistake you're making. Remember, there's three different models of time that Mike introduced, right? There's the eternalism, the possibilism, and the presentism, right? So Mike is saying when we go back to this eternal viewpoint of time, you have to change the way you view time. You can no longer look at it that way if you're going to play along.
I contest it. It's a mistake.
Wait, hold on. So, but as you're speaking, you're revealing that you're not really playing along because you're bouncing back to this.
No, define
presentism.
eternalism. Mitch, define eternalism.
Yeah, all eternalism means is that the past and the future already exist in kind of a block universe.
Yes. Think of time like a map.
So I reject that. I reject that. The future hasn't happened yet. It doesn't exist.
No. Forget about rejecting though. Before you reject it, let's Let's just embrace it for a second.
No.
So imagine that time is like a map. Imagine that's what time is. There's nothing special about time. Time is a map. It's a physical map. So the Big Bang is like, pick any place you want on the map, it's that point on the map. The future is another point on the map. So let's just pretend time is like space.
False
Okay?
analogy. Yeah, you're pretending,
It's
but
not
it's
a
a false
false
analogy.
analogy. I'm
Whoa,
saying
that is
it's not a
actually the
false.
truth
You
of
can't.
science. It's not a
How
false
can you say
analogy.
it's a false
It
analogy?
is a.
Even,
It's a false
Well,
analogy because
it's
like,
only if you accept the block universe. So like I said,
I'm not saying
I
I'm
don't
just saying just
necessarily accept
imagine.
that.
Just saying imagine. I'm not saying if I'm not even saying if I agree with it. I'm just
Right.
saying let's consider it. In that
Right.
situation, if that is how reality is, or if that's a decent model to explore about reality, right? Then in such a
Right.
case, Mike's claims would be correct. These are completely consistent. So when Mike says, so when you say, well, it hasn't happened yet, that doesn't really make sense given the assumption that we're making, because that's like saying Canada isn't there. Yes,
I
Canada is
realize,
on the
but
map.
Mitch, I'm not accepting your assumption, so I'm reaching a different
Well, you're
conclusion
doing two
based on
different
my
things at the same
premise.
time. There's
No,
one
you're
one
Even if
thing
we
is
have a
understanding the claim,
Mitch,
the
you're
other
basing
is
your
objective.
conclusion on a mistaken premise. That's what
No,
I'm
I'm not.
saying.
I'm
Whoa,
not.
wait.
I'm
Hold on,
not.
George.
I am
What
not
premise
making.
is
I'm not
that? What
making
premise is
any
that?
conclusion. I am just
Eternalism. The
describing
premise is
eternity.
that the past and the future exist when all we know that exists is the present.
That's just George. That's just like saying that the space under my feet is the only thing that exists on the earth. You have to understand from your subjective perspective, you can only ever experience the present moment. You can't experience the past, present, and future all at the same time. Just like you can't be standing on different places on earth
Exactly.
at the same time.
Exactly. Just like how you're not in Texas. It's like not being in the future. So the future is like Texas. Are you in
I think
Texas right now? No.
what George is saying is that we don't really know. We can't have knowledge of this block universe because of that.
Well, I think that's a different point though. What I'm trying to get before we even argue whether or not this is true, I'm just trying to describe what is happening. I think George is doing is that he is jumping back and forth from just a description to an argument
I
for.
am not. I'm rejecting your premise.
Yeah, exactly. You see, you keep saying that. I'm not making a premise.
You
That's
are
my
making
point.
the
I'm
premise.
not making a premise. I'm
You're
just
making
no,
your
I'm not.
argument is based on the premise
I'm
But
not
that the
making an argument.
future and the past
I'm
exist.
not
They
making an
don't.
argument, which is why
well,
this.
I'm making that argument. I
Yeah,
am
you just
making
make.
that
I'm
argument.
not
Right.
making an argument. I'm just
Right, and
saying.
I'm rejecting it. I'm not
No,
going
no,
back and
that's
forth.
my
My
But
point.
position
George,
is
why are you
completely
rejecting it? You're
consistent
given
There's
no
no,
good reason to
but
reject
there's
it.
nothing to even
because
reject
there's no
yet.
evidence to support it.
We have experimental evidence that actually does support it, and we have the relativity of simultaneity.
So what?
If you assume presentism, you automatically run into many different paradoxes that you cannot
Explain it.
solve
Present
without
the argument.
the ladder
Present the argument.
paradox. How do
Right.
you get out of that? How do you get out of the ladder paradox?
It's not a paradox. You're looking at point of view time relativity there. So,
No. It's an ontological time different relativity. The
okay, and
only
and
way you
that's
can
what
solve the
I'm
ladder
arguing
paradox is
against.
with the relativity of simultaneity.
But that's what I'm arguing against. So I'm arguing against that the fact that both the garage and the ladder are contracting rather than the thing that actually has the velocity. You're saying that both have the velocity just because one moves, and I'm saying that's not necessarily the case, at least philosophically. So
Wait, which one
you
moves?
can
Wait.
assert that.
Hold on. From the
Okay.
perspective of the ladder, it's not contracting. The garage is contracting. Okay, so from
Right.
that perspective, that ladder cannot fit in the garage. The whole thing can't fit in the garage at the same time. It can't. From the perspective of the
No.
garage,
From
that can be
the perspective of the ladder, the garage is contracting. From the perspective
right.
of the ladder, the perspective is incorrect. From the perspective of us, trains shrink as they get into the horizon. From the perspective of us, parallel train tracks merge at the horizon.
Excuse me, I
You're
have
looking.
a question for George. Now, George, you reject the block universe, the eternalism thing, right?
Yeah.
Then which of the other two theories of time do you stand by?
Well, my theory, and I'm not sure it's included in those three, is like the past once existed, it doesn't exist anymore. The present is the only thing that exists. The future doesn't exist now, but
Possibilism.
it will exist in the future.
That's possibilism.
That's presentism.
Oh, all
Presentism.
right. Okay.
Fish
Yeah.
them out.
I don't know much about theories of time. I'm totally new to all this, but yeah, I kind of yeah, that's kind of how I see it too. But oh,
Yeah.
anyway, go on about the
So
last paradox.
basically, presentism means
I
that
disagree.
just
I
the
think
present exists.
George is describing possibilism, isn't he?
No, no,
No,
no.
possibilism is a
If the
glowing,
past does
growing
not
clock.
exist anymore, then that's
No, he said
presentism.
it. No, George, what did you say? Say it again. What do you
All
say
right,
about the past?
the past once existed, but it doesn't anymore.
See,
The
he said it
present,
once existed. That seems
sure.
to.
Right.
You seem to make it. That sounds more like possibilism than presentism to me. Because
I think he means
presentism
that
would be more like
the
there's.
present existed at that time, and then it moved to the next present, and moved to the next present. So that's what he's saying by the past existed. But he's not really saying
Exactly.
that the past exists. He's just saying that the present existed, the present existed, the next present existed. You know. So yeah.
The
Right.
only thing that exists is the present. The past once existed, the future will exist.
Right. So the past does not have ontological status, on your view.
Well, I mean, no, it depends on how you're defining ontological. I mean, the past did exist. You know, we have
Right.
like, in other words, like we have evidence that it actually existed. It just isn't existing right now.
Okay, so from now, the past does not have ontological status. It once did, but now it doesn't.
Again, it's how are you defining ontological relative to the past? Are you saying that I mean, like it if you're saying that it ontologically
Okay,
it did exist,
let me. It's basically it's the same thing as saying the past does not any longer exist now.
all right, absolutely,
Right.
yeah.
Okay.
How do
Right.
you backwards time travel, George?
What's that?
Mitch, you cut out.
Back travel, is that theoretically possible?
No.
Okay,
Well, we're
presentism.
all traveling into the future right
No,
now,
I just
so
want. No,
it's
no, it's
possible.
okay. Okay, then it's presentism. I agree.
Right. And I lean towards that same position. Just FYI, even though I take a relativistic view of time within the present. So time within the present is relative to the speed and gravity and certain things like that. So I see presentism as kind of the bubble that goes to the next moment. Within that bubble, there's durations that slow down or speed up depending on the
Wait.
the
A
thing.
bubble would the bubble mean that it's not a single time slice, but that it's more like a thick loaf of bread? Because I'm trying to understand the concept of this bubble. Because a bubble obviously is not flat; it's spherical, right? Are you saying that
Yes.
what you consider the present is something like spherical, like it goes a little bit into the future and a little bit into the past?
No, it doesn't go a little bit into the
Use a
future. It's
particle. Use
always
a
just the
particle.
present.
Trick. Use a
It's
particle
always
instead of bubble. Yeah. A particle
yeah.
has a definite point.
If you think of time, or you think of time more as what happens from moment to moment, and duration within that time as how things age, for example, within each moment, you can kind of see it as kind of like a frame of a movie. You have a frame of a movie, but yet things age slower for each frame, while other things age quicker for each frame. Does that make sense?
One more time. Sorry, one more time.
Okay. All right. So you can think of it kind of like a at least this is my, and again, I'm agnostic on this, but this is where I lean. So I just want to make that clear. I'm not, my position is that time is kind of like a frame in each movie of a movie, except only one frame exists at a time, obviously. So I'm a
Right.
presentist. I don't think past frames exist, and I don't think future frames exist. Just you have one frame going to the next frame, going to the next frame. But within that frame itself, you have relativity. So you have, um, depending on the bubble, basically, you have things jumping from one frame to three frames, or
Hold on.
okay,
How did you just get this bubble? Because I'm thinking of a single
Vel-
like a
velocity,
frame of a movie.
right?
Okay, is that the bubble?
No, I'm talking about things in motion within the frame. So you have galaxies that are moving, at a certain speed, which means within those galaxies, time is slowed down compared to the things that aren't outside the galaxies that aren't moving.
Okay, but from those galaxies, the other things are slowing down, right?
No. Well, from the point of view of those galaxies, the other things are slowing down, but not in reality, not ontically.
What is reality? What is the
So,
ontic reality?
That's
The ontic
objectivism.
reality, yeah, the ontic reality is that when we experiment with these things, when we have a
Experiment from
plane
which point of view, though?
experiment
and,
from both point of views,
Just both?
experiment from the
There's only
from the point of view of the person on the platform and the person on the plane, and then coming back around to
back
the
around.
same. Yes, the plane comes around, goes around the Earth, it ends up in the exact same place it started, and the two clocks are compared at that point. When they're
okay,
compared, one clock is slower than the other.
David, Chandler, do you guys want to jump into this mess at any point?
No, I'm with Trick.
Sure. Now, okay, obviously I'm completely lost because I know nothing about theories of time, but it sounds like we're arguing about whether there's an objective
Hello?
time, objective now, um, and and this is related to like the age of the universe. It's confusing, but okay, now I'm still trying to wrap my head around the now I remember there's eternalism where everything the block universe, or is it a sphere or a particle? I can't even keep it straight.
Yeah, eternalism is
Oh,
everything, past, present, and future are here at the same quote unquote time. Think of it like space as opposed to time.
Yeah,
Um,
and
Possibilism is you have the past and the present. Presentism is there's just the present.
yeah, I think I kind of side with presentism at the moment right now.
Well, there is
all
actually a
right.
fourth choice. There's a fourth possibility. There's presentism. There's possibilism. The other one is eternalism.
What
But
is it?
you haven't mentioned hammer time.
Okay.
hammer time. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's where I am. Yeah, hammer time.
It's hammer
Tell us about hammer time. I've never heard of that.
time.
That's when time just stops. It's stop. Hammer time.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Exactly.
What about
Yeah.
pizza time?
It spins around really fast.
So how does this relate to free will, though? So, Mike, you made the point that, and I agree with you, obviously, that eternalism is easily compatible. I probably shouldn't use the word compatible on this show, no pun intended, with
Determinism.
determinism, clearly. But what about the other two? Do you think the other two are less in tune with free will skepticism?
I think all of them could be compatible with determinism.
Mhm.
I don't think presentism could rule it out. Or I don't think that there's necessarily any logical incompatibility between presentism and determinism. Uh, it just if the future does not exist, it's always you could say from that perspective that it's always a possibility that it could somehow change from what it was projected to be, what it was determined to be. That would be a possible door that could be open. Not necessarily that it would happen, but even on a deterministic viewpoint, you might be able to squeeze in the possibility that, well, the future could change since it hasn't yet existed. It hasn't yet happened. On the eternalism, that view is
I would disagree
totally
with that.
closed out.
Yeah, no, yeah, Mike. I mean, like, determinism stipulates, causality stipulates that the future has to, evolve in a precise way based on that causality. It doesn't have any kind of choice in the matter.
Right.
Yeah, I understand,
But when
but
it comes to free will, it's not just about something else happening, right? It's about drawing meaning in the fact that human beings somehow consciously make the alternative happen. So let's say you're at a time t, and you can go two different routes. So let's take, I guess possibilism and presentism both are in line with this kind of notion. Let's say you're at a certain point in time t, and we're saying, okay, let's be open to the possibility that You could go route A or you could go route B. Is it still meaningful? Does that mean it's meaningful to say a human being consciously can control whether you go route A or route B?
No, because causality causality are the only two potential mechanisms, and both refute free will. There's absolutely no scenario within free will where free will could possibly exist,
Yeah,
regardless
exactly.
of.
So I'm saying, let's say, because I think Neil Gafter, guest host of the show, he's been here a couple times. We had an exchange through emails. You guys, I'm sure, have received it and replied. Some of you probably replied to it as well. And I pointed this out to him. I said, okay, so he likes to put it in the language of rewinding the universe. That's how he likes to describe it. So let's say you rewind the universe to time t, and path A occurs. Then you rewind it again back to time t, and this time path B occurs. Does that mean free will exists?
It's a false premise. You can't rewind it
But let's say you
exactly.
could, even if you could. Let's say it could happen. Does
If you,
that mean
if you
free
could
will?
rewind it and time B occurred, then that would have to be an acausal event. It couldn't be a causal event unless you have a contradictory cause. And if it's an acausal event, that's something that's obviously out of your control, so you don't have free will for it. So yeah.
Right, and if you posit an alternative, different future, that future will have had a precise causality that regresses back to before the person was born. So it's a different causal chain.
But going back to eternalism,
Yeah.
if we say let's say a block universe exists, okay, I think that could have the effect possibly of leading people to more fatalistic ideas about
It's
the lack of free will.
well
So you're
that's
saying, wait, just real
I
quick, I want you to talk right after Beck. So just to be clear to everyone who's listening, we're saying that regardless of which model of time we use, free will still is incoherent. But
Yeah.
now we're talking about which model of time, if accepted by the scientific community, for example, would lead to people believing more in free will or believing less in free. Which model of time would affect free will belief the most?
Well,
right.
if you
That we're talking.
believe that
Well,
if you believe the past, present, and future all exist simultaneously, then that's kind of like saying anything's possible. I think that would like support free will
No,
the
I
most,
strongly disagree with that.
because
oh,
there is
I
no
strongly
causality.
disagree with that. It's
If the
saying nothing is
past,
possible. It's saying
if
everything is already there on the map.
if the
That's
past,
not what it's saying.
present, and future exist simultaneously, there is no causality.
no, George. They don't exist simultaneously because time is simply just a slice of that block. That's what now is. They don't exist simultaneously in the same exact way that Texas and New York don't exist in the same place.
Exactly. You have to get out of the notion of time and go
Yeah.
back to space. You have to.
That's the biggest problem I have.
Technically they exist simultaneously. So technically, there's no such thing as non-simultaneously in a block universe. Everything exists, and that's it, basically. And what we're perceiving is, our slice that we're in, but everything is that block universe. So George is technically right on that. I mean,
Well, but George is kind of implying looking at the eternalism through the prism of presentism by saying it exists
Exactly.
simultaneously, as if every point on Earth exists at the same place. And
Well, I'm
that's what
not
I
saying
want to
that
make sure that there's no
necessarily.
confusion on.
I'm not saying that necessarily. I'm saying that like if you posit the past existing, simultaneously with the future in an objective way without reference to relative position, then you do away with causality.
Why? Why? I don't see how that
Because
entails.
because causality requires a past that comes before the present in order to cause it.
It's just like dominoes falling down, going from left to right. The older domino still exists at the current moment when the current domino is falling down, right? It doesn't knock out causality at all. It's just that just look at the entire history of the universe as if it was on a film. And you have the Big Bang as the first second of the movie, and now is somewhere in the middle or wherever. The past still existing
Yeah.
does not mean that there's no causality from the past to the present.
Well,
Yeah,
It
but
just
Mike,
means
let me support you
the
for a second.
causality is just locked into place.
Trick
you
came up with an example earlier that I think really supports what you're saying. So we know that videos don't really exist, right? there are images. We call them frames. And when we see a video, what we're actually seeing is a bunch of frames being played at a certain speed. So it's just picture, 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 picture. And when you flash through these images quickly enough, it gives the illusion of a continuous video stream. So imagine if that's what time is in reality. Like, this is the picture,
Yeah.
and the other picture's
What?
above it, and the other picture's above it, the other picture's above it. And if you looked really quickly, it would be like one continuous stream. But in
Yeah, but
actuality, there's just these frames.
but given that analogy, we know that one frame doesn't cause the next frame to occur, and that's what George is saying. Basically, saying if the frames already exist, then how does one really, in the sense that we mean by causality, cause the other one to happen when that one already exists? So
Yeah,
understand what we're
I
saying?
see. I do get what George is saying, but I guess you would have to. That's a very, very good point. But I think all you have to do really is redefine what a cause is. What a cause
Yeah,
becomes is the previous frame, as opposed
yeah.
to anything else. That's all.
You could just
Yeah,
say
but
it's
you
the
can't
previous frame,
redefine
but
causality. That's
yeah,
like redefining free will.
Huh?
No.
No, we're
You
not
can't
no,
redefine
no.
There are
causality.
plenty of different views on causality.
No,
There's
but
the
many of them are
Aristotelian
mistaken.
view. There's other views.
But Mike, there are
yeah.
plenty of different views on free will. Only one
No,
of them
no.
is
Let's
correct.
let's stop these false analogies. Like, now we're making a false analogy because
No,
now you're
no, no,
comparing.
no. Compatibilists say
No,
free will exists because they redefine it. You're saying there may be a kind of causality different from the one we're exploring
Well,
that may
George,
exist.
clearly in
I'm
every
saying
different
no.
model of time, causality will mean something different. Clearly.
No, there's only
So it's
one principle and
Okay,
concept
hold
of
on, George.
no,
causality.
we're
Let's
not
hear
making
the
any sense.
objective definition of causality.
Causality is that something will not happen, an event will not happen unless it is like made to happen by something that makes it happen.
Well, doesn't really.
That's
yeah.
causality.
Causality is cause and effect. You have a cause that leads to an effect. The cause causes the effect. If you're saying that one event doesn't lead to the next event happening, if you're saying that that's the case, that the other event already happened, then you're kind of in some ways abandoning the notion of causality that
no, you're
most people refer to when they say cause and effect.
a causality is simply just a description of different physical systems that are happening from one moment to the next, how things evolve naturally.
No, but
And
it's the
it
relationship
explains
The
between
word
them.
evolve even implies that one event leads to the next event.
Yeah, and
That's what
in
evolve.
yes,
fact, I think
it's
one could
the same
argue
thing.
that.
You're just looking at the block universe from one section of it going in the forward direction of time, which is the
But
direction that entropy is increasing.
but
And you're saying, well,
there is no flow of time in the block universe. In the block universe, there is actually no flow of time at all.
I know, but you don't need a flow of time to have causality.
Agreed.
That's what
In
I'm saying.
fact, I think one could argue that only through the eternalist perspective can you have causality.
That's
Because
absurd.
No, I disagree
think you could
totally.
I think one could argue that depending on how you think of causality, because one could say that in presentism, all you have is the present point. In causality, you need 2 points, right?
No,
You need
but
the cause and you
you're
need the
wrong.
effect.
No. In the
Presentism
presentism, you
requires
have one present point leading to the next present point, leading to the
No,
next
no,
present
but you
point.
said
having been
leading to is
caused
cheating
by
though.
a
At any
past
point,
point.
there's just the present point. Whereas with the eternalistic point of view, you can look at cause and effect. You can look at it because it's there. You
No,
can see
Mitch, the
cause and effect.
No.
presentism kind of like assumes that the present didn't just emerge. The universe
Right.
didn't just emerge in the present. It was
But again, I already
caused by
addressed
the
this.
universe
Like
in
I
the
said, you can
past.
break up cause and effect into like frames.
But
So it's just the
no,
previous frame is the cause.
it's like what Mitch was, what Trick was explaining. You know, one frame in a movie does not cause the next one.
Well, it depends how you describe cause. You could define a cause as being the frame prior to the other frame.
No.
Only if they have a
If you're
relation.
watching a movie and you see the actor raise his hand in the movie, the frame before he raised his hand did not cause the next frame of him raising his hand in the movie. The two frames exist separate from each other, and they just occur in sequence.
Yeah,
They're
but
just they're a sequence of events. That's all. That's all they are, is a sequence of events.
but there's a logical connection between
Exactly.
one
That's what I'm
and the
saying. I'm
next.
talking about redefining cause. I agree
It's
with you,
illogical,
Trick,
but
in
it's
this.
not a causal connection.
It
It's a
is causal if
correlation,
that's
It
what
maybe.
is
cause
causal.
means. If
It's
that's
not
what a cause
causal.
is, then that's what it means.
No,
It,
no,
it
That's
is a
it,
cause
causative.
because if let's say your birth, for example, if your parents didn't meet, you would not exist right now. Okay, your parents existing in the past of the block universe, does not in any way not take away the fact that they caused your existence to happen.
if the
Yep.
present, past, and future are existing simultaneously, that cannot occur.
What are you talking? What?
Okay, logically demonstrate that.
Because they're happening at the same time. How can, if everything is happening at the same time, how can one cause the other? Causality requires that something in the past is causing something in the present. Causality, goes along the arrow of time. That's why we don't have reverse causality. That's why we don't have things in the future
Well, we do
causing
have
things in the
reverse
past.
causality.
I don't buy it.
Okay,
And the atomic scale. The
but
atomic scale.
you can technically, have a reverse causality.
No,
But
wait a minute. That certain like quantum mechanical equations allow for time travel, from the past to the present or from the future to the past. But like, for example, that's like saying,
yeah,
well, just because mathematics says that you can subtract 3 from 2, you can subtract 3 apples
George,
from
could you
2 and
stop
get
the
a negative
analogies?
apple.
I don't really like
no,
analogies.
I'm just
Sorry,
saying
no,
Okay, we're
analogies
going
are a
off on
way
a
of explaining
tangent here. We're
things.
Analogies
going
are
off
not.
on a tangent.
No,
yeah.
get
This is
used
a
to 'em.
tangent. This is a
Okay,
tangent,
so
actually.
we're going off on a tangent. So George, you were trying to say that if the past, present, and future all exist, causality goes out the window because the past has to cause the future to exist, right? Something like that?
Exactly. The most
Okay.
objective, general description of causality is relative to the universe. The universe evolves moment by moment, state by state, cause by cause.
But if every single thing exists at the same time, that doesn't take away causality.
No, it
Because
doesn't.
what happened in the past is the description of what the present is going to be like. And the description of the present is what's going to describe what the future is going to be like.
If
Each
everything is
causes one
taking
another.
place, if everything is taking place at the same time, there actually is no past and future. There is only this
But
simultaneous
George,
present.
I want to make sure that you're not assuming presentism when you're judging eternalism, right?
No,
I'm
no,
saying,
no.
I'm asserting
He's
that
saying time is
eternalism just
illusion
doesn't
in
make
the block
sense.
universe.
No,
The
time is not an
Basically,
flow of
illusion in
time,
the
the
block
flow of
universe.
time
Time
is
is
an illusion.
time in the block universe. It's not an
The
illusion.
flow of
That's what
time is
time
an
is.
illusion.
Time is
It's not
different.
time. It's
The
not that
block
time is an
universe
illusion.
doesn't
Flow of time.
correctly understand time.
What are you
Time
talking
cannot.
about, George?
It
Time depends on what ontology is. You can't you
Exactly.
time
can't you can't have a
Yeah,
preconceived notion of time and then say, "Oh, this description of the universe is not compatible with my
I
preconceived
agree.
notion of time."
time does not allow for the present and the past to exist simultaneously.
Yeah.
On the
If
block
you have
universe, it does.
if you
Exactly. The
have
block universe it does. So you can't say that. That doesn't make any sense.
if you
See?
have a loaf of bread and you sliced it up into supposed time slices, you can't ever say that one slice of that bread led to the other slice of that bread, the next slice of that bread in that loaf. And that's all we're saying, I think,
Okay,
is
even if that's the
causality
case.
has to be redefined in
Okay,
some way.
but even if that's the case, so what? It doesn't
No,
ruin the notion of causality.
well, it
If
does.
everything,
No, it doesn't. No, it
And
doesn't.
even if it does, even if it does ruin causality, let's say it does, it still doesn't allow for free will. If that's what we're afraid of,
well, no,
if
we're
we're
agreed.
afraid of
We're
free
agreed on
will,
that. We're
Yeah.
okay,
agreed on
good.
that.
Oh yeah,
Suppose it
of
does
course we're all
destroy
agreeing that.
causality. Fine, it destroys causality. So what? Big deal. No causality.
Yeah.
So
Now what,
what?
George?
Okay, well
Exactly.
then we
So
have to
what?
talk about other things such as fatalism
Yeah.
because there's a big difference
Maybe.
Okay,
between
yeah, exactly. That
determinism.
you were bringing that up. You were bringing that up, and then we went on this tangent. But yeah. So Trick, go ahead. Talk about fatalism and eternalism.
So yeah, so fatalism basically means no matter what we think, say, or do, it doesn't matter to the outcome of the future. And if we're saying that there's no causality in the sense that me and George are basically saying is causality, then we're basically saying that whatever we think, say, or do, it doesn't matter. If it if that part of that time slice is that we will not get cured of the disease, then it doesn't matter if we take the pills to cure the disease. Fatalism is the case.
No, it does not logically entail in the same exact way that fatalism does not logically entail from determinism. It's the same thing.
No,
Even on
right.
the even on a
Fatalism
personal
doesn't entail from determinism because the event of actually taking the pill leads to the next event of you starting to get better, which leads to the next event of you being cured of the disease.
That's the same
Whereas,
exact thing that happens on
Same exact
eternalism.
thing. So imagine this: you just look at the map. Let's say you're looking at the map. You're looking at the map and you see the pathway from the person who was sick to the person who was healthy, and you look at the trail. The next frame was took the medicine, swallowed the pill went down the esophagus, went in the belly, blah blah blah. 2 weeks passed. So you're going northeast along this map, and then you get to being healthy. So there's no
okay,
fatalism. It's still the pathway when you're looking in the map, when you're looking at it frame by frame, that leads to this person being healthy. If you were looking at the map.
It's just like in a movie when someone takes a pill and gets cured. The whole thing exists if you roll out that film reel. It's the same exact thing. Now
but in the movie,
psychologically,
you have sequences of events that aren't causally related.
they are causally related because of the second law of thermodynamics. Entropy increases in the direction that time goes in. So the events of the present are going to be related to the events of the past, and the events of the present are going to be related to the events in the future. It's
Guys,
all related.
we're talking about a physical film strip, frame by frame
Right.
by frame. One frame is not causing the next one.
Even if
You're
you don't
you're
like the word
basically
cause,
It's not
you're
causing it
basically
to
saying
exist.
you're
It's
basically
not
you're
causing it to
basically saying that
exist.
there's a flow of time within the block. Is that what you're saying? That there's
No, of course
that
not.
within the
No,
block
no.
itself, there's a flow of time from each
there
event to
is a
the next
root.
event.
No, no, of course not. The frame before the one you're looking at doesn't cause the one you're looking at to exist, but the state of the frame before the frame you're looking at is the description for why the frame you're looking at is the way it is. It's the flow of things over in the block universe from one frame to the next. So if in one frame you have a gun to your head and you pull the trigger, the next frame after that is not going to be you standing there with your brain intact. It's going to be you on the floor with your brains blown out on the side of the wall. So each frame is a description of what's going to happen in the thing in the future and what happened in the past.
All
It's
right,
all logically
Mike,
connected.
let me explain what I think you're saying. In other words, like you have one frame and then you have the next frame. Now that first frame took place within the universe at the precise moment before the second frame took place. Okay, but that doesn't in any way suggest that that first frame caused the second frame. They're
It
both
didn't.
caused. They're both caused by the universal states of the universe through this causal process.
Or are you saying that it does cause it? Because that's what I'm trying to get clear here.
No, no,
Are
no.
you saying that?
I
It
think Mike is strategically not using the word cause because you guys are so adamantly saying that's not sufficient for a cause. I think we're both open to the idea of not using the word cause, but we're still trying to strongly indicate there's a link between the frames.
Well,
Yeah,
if
of
you're
course.
saying there could be a correlation,
There's
correlation
no, no,
doesn't
no, no.
necessarily.
There's a logical link between the frames, and the reason why is because
Yeah,
of the
no.
second law of thermodynamics.
I don't disagree with that. Sure, there's a link, but it's not a causal link.
Okay,
It
so
doesn't
what?
really matter though, does it?
No,
Not to free
I
will.
kind of get what they're saying a little bit here. Like if you have I don't know, is there an interaction? I guess that's taking place between the two. I
Yeah,
guess is the
the
question.
laws of physics in our universe are such that if in one frame you're holding a bowling ball, and in the next frame you let go of it, the next frame after that, the bowling ball is going to be dropping. And you can say that, and if you look at that frame and say, why is the bowling ball dropping? All you have to do is refer to the earlier frames and say, okay, well, in this frame he let go of the bowling ball. That's why. That was the cause of it. Or that's the description of it.
And we have
Well,
strong
yeah, we're
evidence to
agreeing on
support
that.
this theory
We're not disagreeing with
because
that.
we have strong evidence to support this theory because as we know when we try to record time, what do? The only thing we can do is break it up into frames. So when we try to record what we think of, what we perceive of as time, what we always end up doing is getting this thing that looks like a continuous video but is actually split in frames. So
Okay,
this is
this
our
this idea of free will says that we human beings are causing our decisions. Okay, now Mitch, you were saying you didn't like analogies, but several times we were talking about time, and you'd use the analogy of a map. Okay, so basically, like, in other words, like, so I'm using this analogy of we don't have a free will, so we don't cause things. So in that same way, in a film strip, you have two frames, and one of them is not causing the other in the same way that we're not causing anything as human beings, because everything is caused by this causal progression of the universe.
According to the
follow, sorry.
laws of physics, including the second law of thermodynamics, the frames are going to be logically ordered of states where in one direction it will be lower entropy, in the other direction it will be higher entropy. And that's the reason why the frames make sense with one another. So
I
you
agree with you,
make
but
an
what I'm
egg and
saying,
you cook it.
I'm agreeing with you. What I'm saying is, human beings, we're manifesting, the causal will or whatever of the universe. We're not actually causing it in the same way. Yeah, these frames are manifesting or expressing causality. They're not actually creating it.
The past frames are not exactly they're not ontologically causing the present frames to exist or any future frames. Yeah, so the future frames will exist regardless, right? Is
Right,
that
right.
what you
And
understand?
well,
Yeah,
not regardless, just
but
like the fundamental cause isn't like this exact frame, just like it isn't our human brain. It's this like causal process that as far as science knows, began with the Big Bang.
right.
Okay.
Okay, so I want to get into maybe some of the psychological implications of eternalism, because I find that for most people, not necessarily all, that the one of the biggest reasons why they reject eternalism is because it's kind of depressing, give with the notion of the idea that our future is locked into place. And I told someone about eternalism recently, and they said, "Fuck you," literally. They got so angry of the idea that their future is already determined and locked into place. They literally started cursing at me. So, and I see that from you guys, it seems to be also the case that a lot of the views that I'm hearing from you against it seem to be a lot like you just don't like it.
I'm
Like you just
agreeing
No,
with
no,
don't.
you.
no,
I'm agreeing. We're
no,
both
no.
agreeing with you. No,
What?
I am completely agnostic. I have
the future
no
is locked
I'm
into
agnostic
place.
too,
force in
I
this
lean.
race.
I'm agnostic too, and I lean towards presentism because of the philosophical reasons for presentism.
Oh, wait a
For
minute. What,
example,
Mike?
with
What were you
relativity.
referring to? You saying we're disagreeing with you? What were we disagreeing with you about?
Well,
that
George
that
About
the block
eternalism.
universe exists.
strongly resisted the idea of of
About
eternalism.
eternalism, George. Yeah, of
You were
All
course.
right,
completely
no, no, but
against
all
it.
right, but because all right, you just framed eternalism within the perspective that everything is locked in stone. Everything is like the future is
Yes.
locked,
Yes.
is set in place. We're in
Right.
complete agreement with that. That's what I'm
Okay.
saying. So you got to define exactly where
Right.
the disagreement is.
Okay. The only disagreement is that you don't think it exists ontologically. I do. In the exact same way, like when you're driving down a road and you're going to, let's say, Disneyland doesn't begin to exist when you get there. It's already there. You just haven't gotten to it yet. In the same exact way, the future is already there. It already physically exists. We just haven't gotten there yet from our subjective perspective. That's
Well,
what
all
we
right,
disagree on, right?
but where's the evidence of that?
Special relativity, the relativity of simultaneity. We also
No,
have
don't give me a term.
experimental evidence that shows
Give
that.
me a logical argument. Don't give me a term. Explain it logically.
You cannot have the relativity of simultaneity without the block universe. There's no way you can have the relativity of simultaneity with an objective reference frame.
Okay, you're making an assertion. Explain how the simultaneity of relativity just makes this thing impossible.
Okay, any two events separated by distance cannot ever be said to be occurring simultaneously objectively. You can only say that they're occurring simultaneously depending on the reference frame. This is what we went over in the first
Well,
half of
doesn't
this.
that
So
argue against the block universe in this
no,
eternalism
it
then?
supports the block universe because in the block universe, every single thing would have to be happening at the same exact time universally everywhere in the universe. That is
Right.
not the case. If two things are happening at different times depending on reference frame, you cannot have a universal reference
Yep.
frame.
Yep.
All right, but the premise is mistaken. So in other words, if the premise is that two or more things are happening simultaneously, give me some evidence that that's the case. Give me some evidence that the Big Bang is happening at this very moment.
It's not happening at this moment now when we're having this podcast. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
No, of course it's
We're in
not happening
Texas.
now.
That's the
It's not
problem. We're in
happening now.
Texas, and the Big Bang is in Mexico. That's the problem.
Oh, no. Let's say the Big Bang is 0 degrees north, which is the North Pole. That's the better analogy. We would all agree which way north is and that it's 0 degrees, no matter where we are on Earth. But we would disagree how far it was in the past, and we would be seeing it from different perspectives in the block universe. To say that the past, present, and future all exist is not to say that every place on Earth exists at the same place, George. It seems
But
to be that you're still
Okay,
confused by this.
if you want to
why are you
explore this
saying?
spatially, wait a minute. If you want to explore this spatially, basically we'd have to refer to, for example, let's say positive units of measurement versus negative units of measurement. So basically, in other words, like 10 miles is different from 5 miles, is different from 0 point, is different from negative 10 miles, conceptually. So like these points in time, in space, they are not equivalent. They're, 10 miles is different from 5 miles. So like in that same way, 10 minutes from now is going to be different than 5 minutes from now is different from the present. They're not all existing simultaneously, just as
But you're
that
cheating because you
mileage.
jumped out of
Okay,
eternalism. You're
let's.
jumping out of it.
I'm using your analogy of equating this to a map in
No,
space.
no, no. Look, wait, one
Let.
second.
Oh,
I lost you, George.
For
You guys
example,
were like trying to like explain eternalism within this spatial
that's
map
how it has to be
analogy.
explained. That is it. This is why
No,
we
it
Because
come.
this is
doesn't
the
have
whole
to be
point of
explained.
Well,
No, it doesn't.
no. This is
Time
the
is
way to explain eternalism. I'm saying if you're going to explain eternalism, this is the way to do it. There's a reason we use space time and put a hyphen when we talk about space
But
time.
Mitch, that's the purpose of my previous analogy was to explain to that spatial analogy breaks down because there's a difference between 10 miles and 5 miles in terms of
No, no, no.
distance.
Here's an easy way to let's take a globe instead. Think of a globe. Where is the Big Bang on the globe? It's a
Where is
globe.
the Big Bang on the globe?
Yeah, so now you have to replace the Big Bang. It has to be a country or a point or a position, latitude, longitude, as
All
Mike.
right, well, where is the Big Bang on the globe? I'll tell you exactly where it is. It's at the exact center point of the globe, of the orb.
We're on the surface of the globe, right? The
That's right.
surface.
Yes, the Big Bang is like
There
the
is no
inner
center
Earth.
point, George. You have to pick a
There is
point.
there is a center point of the Earth. The Big Bang
There
would
is
be
no center point on the surface of a globe, George.
We're not
That's not
talking,
correct.
but
I
if
think
you,
I think we're getting off track. Let's go back to the simultaneous thing because why you're seeing the block universe from it is I think is a little skewed as well. So you're saying that because, for example, in special relativity, one person is um, going slower through time than the other in reference to the other, and then vice versa, the other one's going slower through time in reference to the other. How does that equate to the block universe again?
It's not necessarily the slowing of time that is a factor, but it's also the length contracting that's another factor.
Same
But
thing.
well, yeah, when
Same
things
difference. I
slow
mean,
down,
there's
they'll contract naturally. Yeah. Um,
okay.
it comes from the fact that depending on your reference frame relative to something else, two events separated by distance cannot be said to be happening ontologically at the same time. Because
Let's
in order
say that
to
is true. Let's say that is true. How do you get the block universe from that?
because if my present is your future, that means the future has to exist.
If
And
your present
if
is
your
my
present is my
future,
past.
wait. If your present is my future, my present is your future. So how does that equate to the block universe?
It's not my future. It's not. If, for
That's
example,
relativity. That's relativity. That is what relativity says. Relativity says that from my point of view, you're moving slower through time, and from your point of view, I'm moving slower for time. If both are the case, how does that get to the block universe?
I'm not sure. Okay. Here's the way it is. If you were separated to me by distance, right, and I started moving towards you near the speed of light, right,
Mhm.
my reference frame would switch at an angle to your future, okay? And so my now would be your future. And depending on how far the distance is from between me and you and how fast I'm traveling, it could be well into the future. It could be millions of years into the future. And your
Relative
reference,
to relative to you, my reference point would be the exact same. So if you take two people floating in space, relative to each other, whatever the one does, the other one does in opposition, relative to the other person. Am I correct or wrong on that?
Yes, because there's no objectivity between who's moving away from who. So
Right.
like if you and I were floating in space, and
So given that, from my perspective, you're farther or back in time, whereas from your perspective, I'm farther back in time. So how does that lead to the block universe?
well, if both of our presents are our futures, then the future would have to exist.
But then you're just redefining the future as the present.
You, I'm saying, I'm
No,
saying,
no.
okay, if you're gonna put us in the loaf of bread, this loaf of bread that is time, basically, okay, where am I situated in that loaf compared to where are you situated in that loaf?
We're on different ends of a loaf of bread.
How is that when from my perspective, you're back in the loaf, and from your my perspective, or I'm sorry, from your perspective, I'm back in the loaf, and from my perspective, you're back in the loaf, in the back of the loaf.
Oh no. Forget about no. Forget about look at the loaf of bread the long way. Let's say the long way is going left to right. Okay. Then the slices go up and down. Okay. Let's say that's the block universe, where I'm on the one end on up and you're on one end down. Okay. We're not left and right. We're on top of each other. I'm
But
towards the north.
you're
You're towards the
saying that
south.
you can get to the block universe from relativity. You're saying the
Yes.
fact that
It's
we
unavoidable.
both
It's unavoidable.
you're saying that the
In
fact
order
that we
to in order
both
to
have different times, right? So I have a different time and you have a different time. And you're saying that somehow leads to the block universe. And now
if
and
we're
I know Green, like he has this whole thing where he addresses time slices at being on an angle and things like that, and really he's talking about perceptions of the speed of light that reaches from one area to another, which is totally different than
he's no
relative.
he's talking about an ontological difference from your reference frame on what events are happening right now, and you can't get that with a single objective reference frame. And I don't even really understand how time would even slow down in an
I'm
objective
pretending
reference frame.
there's no single objective reference frame. Okay, there's no single objective reference frame, and I'm agreeing with you that there's no simultaneous time. Okay, for the sake of argument, I'm agreeing with that that time is different from your perspective, looking back at me, as time is different from my perspective, looking back at you. How does that lead to the block universe? Because the block universe does not assert that. There's nothing that leads to a block universe in.
No,
From
that's
my
completely
consult.
not true at all. If
Okay,
if
explain it.
your future is my present, the future has to exist. That's how you get the block universe. If
If
your
my
past is my
future,
present.
hold on. If my future is is your present, right? Then your future is my present.
Okay.
Where in the block are we both situated?
We're just separated by distance. We're separated
In
by
the
distance.
block.
Trick,
In
I
the
don't really see what your problem. I mean, eternalism just is perfectly fit with the block universe theory of time. That's basically what it's. I don't really
Eternalism
understand.
is the block universe of time, and that's what
Right.
eternalism is.
Oh, so
But
what's your disagreement then? What is the
that
problem?
special relativity that we're or relativity in general says that the block universe exists.
That's the
So
dominant view
your
in physics, and that's how it more easily entails from
so
relativity.
your
In fact,
disagreement is the link between special relativity implying a
Yes,
block universe.
correct.
Okay, well, I mean, well, in that case.
in order to avoid eternalism with special relativity, you have to make some ad hoc assumptions about certain things. You have to presuppose something like a universal ether that is like a thing that scientists supposed back in the 1800s that all
No, no, no.
experimental evidence has ruled out.
I just want to know the logical reason because it's never been clear to me what the logical connection is
Right. It's
between
it's easier
because
if I could.
I understand what special like what relativity is, general relativity, I understand what these things are, and even if we accept ontic relativity, meaning the it's actually the case that time is just relative between two existing points of view, that doesn't, from my perspective, lead to a block universe of time.
I'd have to draw it out to show you. I would have to draw out what we call a Minkowski diagram. You know what a Minkowski diagram is?
No, I'm
It's a
not
Mike,
familiar with
simple.
the term.
let me explain
It's a
Trick's
simple.
position. No. Basically, you're saying that like relatively, one person is moving faster relative to the other, or one person is in the future relative to the other. Trick isn't contesting that. Trick is asking, how does that explain the future and the present existing simultaneously, ontically, objectively? Because like what you're explaining in terms of this relativistic positions is relativistic. It's not objective or ontic.
Okay. This is very hard for you for people who don't really have the background knowledge
No,
of the
don't pull
visuals
that.
of
Don't
it,
pull
of the
that.
visuals of it.
Don't even try that.
No,
George, come
I've
on.
studied
Let's
this.
be
I've
honest here. You
studied
don't
this.
No, sorry,
understand it.
sorry,
Michael,
Mike.
I've
Sorry, Mike.
studied
I've
this
probably
topic
studied
in
physics a lot
depth.
Okay,
more than you
okay.
have.
Then I shouldn't really have to explain this to you. You should understand it already.
Oh yeah,
I've
that's like
looked at
physicists
all
who
the
like.
evidence for it, and I think the conclusions are wrong. I don't think that I think people are making mistakes in logic for this
Exactly.
assessment.
It's not
So
a
Uh,
so so I need to know what, because you should be, you as the one proposing this should know what you're proposing. So you should be able to
right.
explain it to us.
Every time I explain it to you, it really helps to have a visual to be able to understand it. And when the problem comes from you not understanding me is because there really isn't that visual aid to be able to aid what my description is of the
Okay.
block universe. But here's the thing.
That's
Here's the thing.
understandable. That's
It's
understandable.
very.
But you don't. No, wait a minute. You don't need a visual to explain time. Time like can be explained in terms of
You
like
do,
past,
George,
present, and
because this
future.
is you do, George, because the conventional notion of time, the intuitive layperson's in notion of time is presentism, and that's very easy to understand.
All right, wait
Eternalism
a
is a
minute.
bit more
If you're
complicated.
claiming you understand it and you can't explain it in terms of time, by what basis are you understanding it?
I understand the ontology and the metaphysical implications of relativity. I understand some of the math. I understand what's going on there, and I
All right, so
understand
like,
that
but you're obviously understanding it not relative to space. So what is the mechanism? What is the paradigm by which you say you understand this?
Yeah, you got to understand that this is a philosophical question, and scientists aren't necessarily most in tune to philosophical questions. Special relativity is totally scientific, so we could even give, everything about special relativity and say it's all true that time is relative. But why does that lead to a block universe? And this is where I think
okay,
people have the problem.
okay.
Okay,
If two events can never be said to be happening at the same time by a reference
correct,
frame, one would
correct.
have to exist before the other, depending on
Okay,
reference frame,
okay.
right? And so that's how
This
you
is
get
where
the
I'm going to
block
stop you,
universe.
Mike. This is where I'm going to stop you. One would have to exist prior to the other, correct?
Yes, yes.
And
Depending on us,
no
depending
no no
on
no no
one,
no hold on. Relative to the other, it would be reversed. Relative to the other, it would be reversed.
not
Correct?
necessarily, not
Why?
necessarily. It
This
depends
is
on the
what okay.
reference frame.
No, that's what I'm saying. So from the reference frame of one relativistic bubble, the other is back in time. From the from the view of we'll say A and B. We'll say from the view of A, B is back in time. From the point of view of B, A is back in time. How does that lead to a block universe if the two are back in time compared to each other? It doesn't make any sense.
And the thing that you guys are both
Uh,
like ignoring or neglecting is that in addition to relativistic time, there is objective or ontic time based on the Big Bang, which is the objective,
but
determiner
George,
of which is
what you're
happening first
talking
or
about
second.
is a notion of cosmic time. And that's what cosmologists called an FRW expanding universe. But that is which is the redshift factor when you look at the universe as a whole. But it's not an objective reference frame
The
at all.
Big Bang is the standard model of cosmology. It has almost universal consensus, and it stipulates that the universe started 13.72 billion years ago, objectively, not relativistically.
Yeah, it does. But our
George,
assessment
you're still not understanding. You're still not understanding the whole concept of what that means in terms of eternalism. That's just like us
Mike,
both
I am
agreeing
understanding it.
that the North Pole is
What
a
you're
certain
not
distance from
understanding,
here.
Mike. What you're not understanding is that you're trying to use relativity to support eternalism, whereas like relativistic knowledge is not objective knowledge is perspective based knowledge. It's not ontic. Objective knowledge is what we're aiming for, and that comes from starting time with the Big
yeah.
Bang.
I would agree with George on
That
that,
is
but
totally
even
agreed
if we
upon.
give that it's ontic, even if we give that it's an ontic, I want to know the specifics on why it's the block universe is happening, because I don't think that conclusion follows.
It does logically follow, because
Okay.
without differences of time existing all ontologically, you cannot describe certain paradoxes in special relativity, like the latter paradox.
Your premise
So,
is
for example,
mistaken. Ontically different times are not
Wait.
existing, only
George.
relativistically.
Let's.
Sorry.
I want to give him that. I want to give him that there's that time is different for two different things happening in the universe. But the problem is they're relative. So when they're relative, one is relative to the other, and the other one is relative to the other. Per the perspective of one, time is different in that block. So you have a problem with your block. You have a basically a block in which two different views are different.
that's
So
how you get the block universe.
So which one is
no.
right then? I think Trick is
How do you
asking which perspective
reconcile
is
that?
right.
You're not understanding. If I see you as back in time and you see me as back in time because we're relative to each other, then we have a problem, because either in the block one is really back in time and the other one is forward in time, or vice versa. You can't have both, because that makes no sense for that block.
No. It doesn't work that way. When you understand the way this is described in a Minkowski diagram, it all makes sense. But this is the kind of thing that I kind of have to draw in order to be able to describe it.
You
If
can't
Do
use
you?
mathematics to
No.
explain
absolutely
this.
you can use mathematics. What are
You
you talking
Do
about?
you
That's
cannot.
how we
agree with
describe
me?
everything in science.
Mathematics is a conceptual construction. It does not, in other words, again, you can mathematically prove that you can
Wait.
subtract -3 from -2.
That's a totally
That
different. That's
does
a
not
totally different thing, George.
translate.
That's a
That
totally
doesn't
different thing.
translate to
Michael,
having negative
Michael,
apples. I'm
It's a
sorry,
do
totally
like
you
different.
agree
in
with me,
quantum
Michael, that
mechanics, you can have equations that work equally well going back in time as with. You cannot use mathematics to describe reality. Mathematics is just a tool to help us
no,
understand the logic.
mathematics are important, but Michael,
Mathematics can describe reality.
No,
you
but it's
We
agree?
use
logic
mathematics
applied
to
to the
put a man on the moon.
No, it's logic applied to the mathematics. Logic is more fundamental to math. I'm
Well,
sorry.
mathematics is a kind of logic itself.
Well,
It
it
is.
relies on more fundamental logic.
All right,
Michael,
whatever.
do
Not
you agree with?
equivalent. Bertrand Russell proved that mathematics is not equivalent to logic.
Wasn't he recruited
Mathematics
by
is a
someone else?
logical form. Michael, do you agree with me that given special relativity, that if we just take two objects in space, okay, that if one is moving faster than the other, from the perspective of the one that the other one is moving, that one is going slower, correct? Through time.
How are they moving in relation to each other? Are they going towards each other, or one is going towards the other one, or away, or what?
It doesn't matter much, but we'll just say they're moving away from each other.
Okay, they're moving away from each other. Now what?
Relative to each other, the other one is going slower, correct?
Um,
let's do it like the train scenario. They're moving past each other.
Yeah.
That just makes it easier to see, I guess. So they're moving past each other like the train scenario. Um, one is going at, we'll say, five, close to the speed of light. Well, no, we won't even say that. It's going very fast. And relative to that, the one that's going fast, the other one is going fast in the opposite direction. Correct?
Hold on. I'm losing touch with how this looks visually.
Okay. So you're
Let's
just
just
going to
use
imagine two objects.
hold on.
We'll say
Let's just use
a ball with.
standing on a platform and a train goes by scenario. Let's use that.
Okay, I just didn't. I just
right?
wanted to keep the Earth out of it and everything, just so we don't confuse anything. But we can just imagine that type of scenario in space, where
Okay, yeah,
there's a train.
you're floating in space and someone is
I'm
zipping
floating.
by you. Yeah.
Yeah, so someone is zipping by me and I'm floating in space. Okay, so given that scenario, from me looking at the person zipping by me, that person, the time is going slower for that person than it is for me. Correct?
From your perspective, their clock would be moving slower. They have time dilation and they would be length contracted. They'd be tighter. Yeah.
Right. And it is true that relative to me that person's time is going slower. Correct?
From that person, your clock is slower. Yes, and your length
Right.
contracted.
Well, I'm talking about from relative to me. Relative from my perspective, time is going slower. So therefore, from that relativistic view, time actually is going slower. Correct?
Wait. I kind of got lost there. One more time.
Okay. For me, floating in space,
Mm-hmm.
time is going slower for the guy zipping by me. Correct?
From his perspective, yes, your time is going slower.
No.
Is that what you
From
mean?
my perspective, his time is going slower.
Yes, and also the opposite as well. It's
And
also the
also the opposite. From his perspective, my time is going slower.
Yes.
Okay?
Yeah.
So we got that. So let's say our clocks are at 5 a.m. or 5 p.m. We'll say 5 o'clock p.m. They're synced before that takes place. Okay. From my perspective, my clock is now 5:05, yet his clock is 5:03. Okay. The clock on the train, or the train zipping by me, or whatever it's zipping by me. Okay.
Okay.
But from his perspective, it's the reverse. Mine is 5:03, and his is 5 o'clock. Okay? Are we clear on all this?
Yes.
Okay. If now this is the part that's weird. If both are ontologically true, okay, both relativistic views are actually true, where in the block who is at 5:03 and who is at 5:05 within that block? If you're saying that neither, then we have a problem with creating the block. But if you're saying that one actually is at 5:05 and I'm just seeing,
it's because each different perspective cuts the block at a different angle. That's because its now slice is slightly different. And so that's how you
okay,
get the block universe, because you can't cut it at an angle on the eighth theory of time, on the presentist theory of time. On the presentist theory of time, there's one single slice on the block, and that's the only thing that exists. But if different perspectives cut it at different angles.
No. But if we cut it at an angle, let's say we're cutting at an angle from me floating in space to him zooming by me, right? So we're cutting an angle, but if that's the angle, then I'm at 5:03 on that angle, and he's at 5:05 on that angle. Whereas if we reverse it, we have to cut the angle separately, at a different angle. He has to be at 5:03, and I have to be at 5:05. So it's a different area in the block. It's a different area in the block because you can't cut the same angle. So you're talking about two areas that are just mixed in the block. It's almost like they're phasing depending on who's looking at what. So this is where I
It's
don't
very
buy
hard to
into.
wrap. Well, how about this? Why don't I just send you a link that explains this all? It's so much easier when you have a visual graphic.
Trust me when I said I've read tons of stuff on this. I've read Green's material. I know a lot about it, and I don't agree with what I'm reading. So, but if you can find me something that you think that I haven't, and I might be able to parse it.
Incidentally, I think Green believes in free will. Correct me if I'm mistaken.
No. He thinks free will is most certainly nonsense.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, he has a video on it where he says, well, he doesn't fully say it's absolute nonsense. He says it is probably just an illusion.
Right. All right. Because come on, probably. How could he not get this?
I think that he's trying to play it safe because he's in a position of where he needs money, and he, like Neil deGrasse Tyson. Like the only reason why Neil deGrasse Tyson doesn't admit he's an atheist is because there's a negative connotation to it, and he might lose money in the future. People might not give him grants to do speeches and stuff like that. And I think that Brian Greene is the same way. He just doesn't want to say it because people can put that on a website and say, "Oh, he doesn't believe in free will. Let's not have him on our science show."
Bill Nye doesn't believe in free will either. I mean, he believes in free will. Bill Nye, the science guy. I mean, come on, we got to go after these guys.
Yeah, I think.
Let's talk about something else. Let's talk about something else here. Let's talk about the implications of theism in the block universe. How about that? Because George, you're an accurate theist. Is that correct?
Perhaps we should save that for another episode.
You don't want to go there. That's
You're right. We're already at
can of worms.
2 hours. Okay. All right. So let's wrap this up and maybe possibly do a future episode on it.
Sounds good.
Yes.
All right. So Chandler, take it away.
Okay, you've been listening to Free Will, Science, and Religion with a bunch of dudes arguing about time, and
It's about time.
Yeah, it's about time.
There's no free will, no matter what model of time you subscribe to.
Yeah, there's no free will no matter what model of time you subscribe to. But before I close this episode, I just have one thing to say is that what I love about this episode, even though I don't understand most of what was said, is it shows how strong a disagreement we have on tangential issues. We agree on the free will, but man, when it comes to other things, we disagree strongly. So, okay. I guess, thank you for listening and goodbye.